Hi, it's Katrina. Ancient brewery. Archaeologists have just discovered the world's oldest industrial-sized brewery. Found in the ruins of the ancient city of Abydos, this ancient Egyptian brewery is 5,000 years old and operated just like any industrial brewery of today. Abydos was home to Egypt's early kings and is full of their monuments, tombs, and temples. The brewery was enormous. It was made up of 8 parallel sections, each containing 40 ceramic vats to cook the mash before fermenting. Compared to everything else at the time, the brewery could have produced around 22,400 liters of alcohol in a single batch, probably weekly. Even in modern times, that is a staggering amount of beer. According to the project co-leader, Dr. Matthew Adams, even more fascinating is that the brewery probably provided about 8,800 jobs. And yes, archaeologists believe that part of their wage included beer. But unlike how we use beer today, this alcohol would have been primarily used in ceremonial settings, such as for rituals and for funerary rites. The project leaders say that it points to how important beer and bread were for daily life, and that this site also points to a critical time for Egypt, when power symbols were changing. The brewery illustrates how the early rulers incorporated this ritual staple into their formal ideology. The ancient city of Abydos needed this brewery to create the special beer that would then be buried along with the pharaohs and given as offerings at the temples. The head of Vishnu. A restoration team in Cambodia came across a large head of an ancient Vishnu statue. Found in a village near Angkor Wat in Siem Reap, the head was discovered near the central tower of the temple, made from sandstone with only one eye, part of an eyebrow, half a nose, and portions of lips and ears still remaining. This is a Kulin-styled sculpture that was probably part of the temple when it was first constructed back in the 9th century, during the reign of King Jayavarman III, son of the infamous King Jayavarman II, who ruled between 802 and 850. Jay II is considered the founder of the Khmer Empire, who overthrew the previous rulers from Java and brought unification and peace. Later kings described him as a warrior and the most powerful and fearful king of his time. Nobody has found the rest of the body of Vishnu's statue, and it's not clear how exactly the head was separated from its torso. But local villagers did stumble upon a few other interesting relics, including a pedestal with rows of ancient Khmer writing on its side, and a random left hand crafted out of sandstone. Even though Angkor Wat is one of the most impressive and extensively explored temple complexes in the world, new discoveries like this are being made all the time at the dozens of old temples and structures found throughout what was once the capital of one of the largest empires in the world. New photons. In a bizarre new discovery, Chinese scientists have identified some new photons with unheard of energy levels. This was done using a specialized cosmic ray observatory, and they were able to see 12 sources of photons with extremely high energy. They also detected a photon with an energy level of 1.4 million billion electron volts. In other words, the photon discovered boasted an energy level 140 times higher than anything that can be achieved by humans using the impressive Large Hadron Collider near Geneva, the most technologically advanced particle accelerator on the planet. That makes the new photon the thing with the highest recorded energy to ever reach Earth. But what does all this science mumbo-jumbo mean? First of all, it's important to note that the high-energy photon came from the Milky Way, inside our own galaxy. The truth is that scientists can't quite understand how charged particles like photons and atomic nuclei function. We know that they zip through space in velocities nearly the speed of light, and now we know that some of them have energy far beyond what was previously thought possible. We just don't know exactly how to harness the power of photons or why they are flying through space like cosmic bullets. 3,000 bodies. Archaeologists have made some pretty grim findings at a churchyard in Buckinghamshire. During a construction project to build a brand new rail link, contractors stumbled upon 3,000 bodies in an old churchyard. The discovery prompted archaeologists to move in and investigate the site at the old St. Mary's Church. According to The Guardian, the church itself was built after the Norman conquest back in 1080 AD, and its burial yard was used for at least 900 years. The last recorded person to be buried here was from 1908, but this is actually a pretty controversial topic. Construction of the rail link also resulted in about 60,000 bodies being discovered, exhumed and reburied back in 2017 from an ancient burial site near Euston Station. Some argue that infrastructure projects like this are destroying history, and this makes sense considering Old St. Mary's Church was renovated in the 13th century and 17th century, and that it was a central part of the community. Of course, the church fell into disrepair in the 1880s and was later abandoned, but still, just how ethical is it for a construction crew to go in, dig up the dead, and then put them in graves somewhere else? What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Fading cave art. One of the most shocking discoveries recently has to do with cave art and climate change. The island of Sulawesi in Indonesia is home to some of the oldest cave art in the world, dating back at least 45,000 years. Made from red pigments, there are depictions of animals, strange humanoid figures, humans mixed with animals, and hand stencils all over the walls. For many, it is the first story of humanity ever told, depicting some type of hunt with maybe gods watching over. The oldest of all the pieces of art is that of a pig, dated to be 45,500 years old. The researchers say that the cave paintings in Sulawesi and Borneo are some of the earliest evidence we have that people were living on these islands. They said that tragically, at almost every new site we find in this region, the rock art is in an advanced stage of decay. According to Life Science, the authors of the study claim that paintings which have survived for tens of thousands of years will soon be gone because the cave walls have begun to blister and peel. At first, the reasons weren't so obvious. The team had to investigate and analyze samples of artwork between 20,000 and 40,000 years old, spanning 11 different sites. Their conclusion was that salt deposits are likely leading to their destruction. And of course, the salt is produced by high humidity as water is carried into the area, later to be evaporated, leaving behind salt deposits on rock surfaces. A secret tunnel. Gary Matchins from Illinois got the shock of his life when he found a mysterious tunnel from the 19th century under his home. The discovery came after a piece of the sidewalk in front of Gary's house fell apart, revealing an entry into the spooky corridor below. He said there was a lot of brick down there and it would have taken a lot of men a lot of hours to build the tunnel. Many people have lived in the house over the years, but there is no evidence showing that they knew about it. Historians visited the site to try and wrap their heads around it. It wasn't a simple bomb shelter built for the Cold War in the 60s. It was a huge tunnel that who knows where it led to or what people used it for. Historians believe the tunnel dates to 1840, while Gary says that his house can be traced back to the 1890s. Maps of the area from 1863 do not show the tunnel, meaning that it was probably built between 1840 and 1860. There is a set of stairs as well as a crawl space. It could have been part of the Underground Railroad, it may have been used as a simple cellar, or it could have been something even more mysterious that nobody's guessed yet. According to information from the New York Post, Gary is now hoping to use the tunnel to his advantage by offering creepy tours to curious tourists. In the meantime, he is fixing up his sidewalk and making sure it isn't open for just anyone to sneak down there. Hiding in a cave. One of the craziest discoveries that happened during the first days of the coronavirus pandemic was in India. As reported by Global News, tourists were discovered by local authorities isolating inside of a cave after they ran out of money to pay for their hotel. The group consisted of 4 men and 2 women who were discovered trying to survive inside of a cave they had found. The tourists were from France, Ukraine, the US, Turkey, and Nepal. Scared that they would completely run out of money, they ditched their hotel, moved into the creepy cave, and tried to ration their money so they could keep eating since all air travel, rail, and road transport was suspended. And who knows how long they were going to be there. They must have been really scared. Tourists were banned from entering the area, but these 6 people had nowhere to go. They were stuck and broke, and it was a good thing authorities found them when they did, because they could have died inside the cave. But as it stands, the tourists were taken by local authorities to a quarantine center, where they later tested negative for the virus. Sleep before brains. Scientists have just discovered living proof that sleep evolved in animals before brains. Proof has come from a creature known as a hydra. It's less than ½ an inch in length and has a tubular body with a single foot on one end and a mouth on the other. The foot is used to stick to surfaces underwater, and its mouth is covered in little tentacles which it uses to catch water fleas. The hydra has no brain and barely any kind of nervous system. Despite the hydra literally being a brainless, almost microscopic creature, studies done by a team of Korean and Japanese scientists showed that it periodically sleeps. This seems completely impossible, and yet it's true. It would appear that the brain is not a necessary tool for the function of sleep. Of course, the way that these little tentacled monsters sleep is quite different from the way humans do it, but they still do it, suggesting the mechanism of sleep or rest or whatever else you want to call it developed before animals even began growing functioning brains. A letter about poo. Mary Anning was a famous paleontologist from the early 1800s. Mary rose to fame at the young age of 12 when she unearthed the skull of an ichthyosaur in 1811. She gained worldwide prestige as a reptile fossil hunter. But this isn't about any of the fossils she discovered. Rather, this is about a rare letter written by Mary Anning describing something a little strange that has been sold at an auction for over $100,000. According to the BBC, this was more than 8 times its reserve price. The letter in question was written in 1829, addressed to a paleontologist named William Buckland. What was the letter about? It contained information on a fossilized piece of poo. The letter has been described as a unique piece of paleontological history and local heritage for the people of Lyme Regis, where Mary found her first fossil. Imagine the disappointment when, after the local Lyme Regis Museum raised over $40,000 to have the rare letter stored in their museum, but it was purchased by an anonymous private collector for nearly triple. The small town was devastated. They'd wanted the letter to help motivate young people into following their dreams of being paleontologists. Instead, the private seller took the letter about poo and ran away with it. Coprolite, or ancient feces, are actually extremely valuable since they are trace fossils and can help scientists learn what type of animal left them behind and what they ate. It is just in recent years that Mary's contribution to science is being acknowledged, and she led an interesting life. She was born poor and would help her father look for fossils on the weekends to sell to tourists. When her father died, she and her brother continued to look for fossils to support her 8 other brothers and sisters. She survived being struck by lightning and a landslide. While she was well known, she was not taken very seriously because she was not an academic, and she was a woman. Death cults of Malta. Archaeologists working on prehistoric sites all over the world have found chubby female figurines. They are believed to represent the celebration of fertility and health, and are also known as Venus dolls, or the fat ladies. In Malta, these figurines have been found near some of the earliest standing stone structures in the world. Prehistoric temples and burial chambers on the islands contain images of obese feminine figures of all sizes, along with animals and phallic symbols. A new study about these female figures represented in sculptures and in images in ancient sites shows that in Malta, worshipping these corpulent images became so intense it became a cult or an early form of religion. Malta is a dry place with little fresh water and not very much soil, but people from 5,000 to 7,000 years ago had a different experience. The islands were probably much more fertile, but over time crops started to struggle, and the society became more extreme in an effort to survive. An underground burial chamber known as the Hypogeum, found in Hal Saflieni, was the final resting place for 6,000 to 7,000 people. They were buried with all kinds of grave goods, including jewelry made of beads and stone, flint and obsidian tools, and stone figures of obese people and animals. One of the most famous is the Sleeping Lady of the Hypogeum. It's a statue of a chubby female lying on her side on a woven bed. The sheer amount of figurines from all the temples and the Hypogeum have led archaeologists to believe that perhaps Maltese society was a powerful matriarchy dominated by priestesses. However, it looks like they were more closely related to prehistoric rituals of death, since they were mostly found in graves. Cult activities such as building temples and performing rituals ruled the society, and the fertility figures were a representation of the cult of the dead. Cahokia. What is today nothing but mounds of green grass near St. Louis, Missouri, was once the site of the largest ever pre-Columbian settlement anywhere north of the Mexican border. It was occupied from between 800 and 1400 AD, consisting of at least 120 mounds during its peak. At the time, it was one of the greatest cities in the world, even larger than London was in the year 1250. The culture occupied much of the Mississippi Valley, and each mound had its own purpose. For example, there were mounds used for public buildings and for burials. Archaeologists even discovered an astronomical observatory built of wooden posts that they dubbed Woodhenge. Yet despite so much archaeological evidence collected by the experts, we still don't really know a lot about the ancient Mississippian civilization or what happened to them. Like many of the other pre-urban societies of North America, they vanished between 1300 and 1400, leaving no evidence behind as to why they left or where they went. The Sanqingdui aliens. The Sanqingdui ruins were discovered in 1929 in China's Sichuan province, completely by accident. The story goes, a peasant was repairing a sewage ditch when he uncovered jade and stone artifacts. But their importance wasn't really understood until 30 years later, when archaeologists uncovered 2 pits of Bronze Age treasures, including more jade figurines, 100 elephant tusks, and enormous bronze sculptures measuring 8 feet tall. The treasures were broken and buried, indicating they were destroyed as sacrifice. But who were these people? Now known as the Sanqingdui, scientists still don't know much about this mysterious ancient society. There are rumors that these statues and sculptures actually depict aliens. Of course, this is not likely the case, and Chinese archaeologists have strongly refuted any theory that the ancient culture was in contact with extraterrestrial beings. They are actually pretty offended by it. And yet scientists can't explain the bizarre figurines found both at the Sanqingdui ruins and at the less famous Erlitou site in China's Henan province. There are a lot more questions than answers, which is why conspiracy theorists are trying to fill in the blanks. Archaeologists better hurry up. These statues and masks depict humanoid beings with huge heads, pointy ears, and enlarged eyeballs. They could certainly be artistic representations of some kind of deity, perhaps a god or a family of gods. The similarity between the figurines from the 2 different archaeological sites suggests that the civilizations may have communicated with each other. What's truly interesting about the Sanqingdui ruins is that no texts of any kind have been found at the site. Some have speculated that writing could have been made on organic material like cloth or silk, meaning that all of it has decayed since the mysterious civilization vanished. We know nothing specific about their practices or what they believed in. Perhaps earthquakes and landslides are to blame for their demise. An enormous catastrophe may have cut off their water supply, forcing them to move. But the question is, where did they go? And why did they not re-emerge somewhere else? The Utopian Indus. Historians have wanted to know for a very long time how the Indus civilization flourished for 700 years without crafting a single piece of weaponry, and with no evidence of kings or queens, indicating that the society may have been run by elected officials. According to historical texts, the Indus civilization was paradise on Earth. The issue is that nobody can figure out why. The Indus civilization was one of 4 major players at the beginning of the kingdoms on Earth. Mesopotamia, ancient Egypt, and ancient China were all glorified in warfare, but those who lived in the Indus Valley functioned as a utopia from between 2600 and 1900 BC, never succumbing to violence or bloodshed like the other civilizations around them. There have been at least 1,000 settlements discovered in what was once the Indus territory, a huge swath of land covering much of Pakistan, India, and Afghanistan. Today, experts agree that the Indus civilization likely built the bones of what would become the Indian civilization, and they probably created Hinduism. Archaeologists know that the Indus society was quite advanced. The famous city of Mohenjo-daro was made by skilled builders and urban planners, but there are no temples, palaces, or monuments, no obvious central seat of government. Everything was organized and clean. There was a system of seals and weights to control the exchange of goods, and they specialized in export and trade. But most impressive, perhaps, was the control over water. There were sewage systems, drainage systems, toilets, bathing areas in each house, and even small pools. One theory is that their ideology was cleanliness. There is also evidence of the city being quite wealthy, with artifacts such as ivory, lapis, carnelian, and gold beads, as well as the baked brick city structures themselves. However, the cities of the Indus Valley civilization don't show signs of fortification. Were they non-violent? Did they not have enemies? Perhaps their lack of military led to their decline. They couldn't defend themselves and were probably annihilated, though nobody has any clue who wiped them out or how it happened. The Stonehenge Builders. Stonehenge is one of the most iconic archaeological and historical sites in the world. But who really built Stonehenge? They are known as the Builders, but even though this place is perhaps one of the most studied places on Earth, there is still much we don't know about what Stonehenge really is, or the people who made it. It was definitely a burial ground and had great spiritual and religious significance. It took a lot of people a lot of effort to build this place between 3000 and 2000 BC, and some of these stones were brought from hundreds of miles away. Archaeologists are still debating what Stonehenge represents. Its alignment with the stars and the human remains indicate it had a lot to do with the dead and with astronomy, serving as a type of calendar. It also appears to have been a very important gathering place for ancient people. A popular belief is that Stonehenge was built by Druid priests, or perhaps by the wizard Merlin himself. Most recent DNA analysis shows that ancestors of the people who built Stonehenge traveled west across the Mediterranean to get to Britain. Neolithic Britons were farmers and had dark skin and blue or green eyes, and brought the tradition of building monuments using large stones. Towards the end of the Neolithic era, the farmers were replaced by another new population known as the Bell Beaker people, who migrated from inland Europe. They had lighter skin with dark eyes. Something happened, and the Neolithic cultures began to collapse. The cliff-dwelling Anasazi. The Anasazi people, or the ancestral Puebloans, are famous for their entire villages or pueblos built into cliffs. They lived in what is now the current Four Corners region of the United States, most famously Mesa Verde and Chaco Canyon. The name Anasazi actually comes from the Navajo Indians and loosely translates to mean enemy ancestors. This ancient Native American civilization lived in sandstone dwellings carved deep into secluded canyons. The ruins here are in abundance, with many saying that the Anasazi were one of the greatest Neolithic civilizations anywhere in America. To this day, there are still giant towers left over and huge ceremonial chambers with ceilings that weigh up to 90 tons. They could only be reached by climbing and were fortified against enemies. They created roads and irrigation systems for watering their crops and used colorful pottery, woven baskets, and sandstone to decorate their homes, greatly influencing what Southwest style means today. The Anasazi civilization lived in this area for over 1,000 years, but in a single generation, they were gone. Between 1275 and 1300 AD, they stopped building entirely, and the land was left empty. They are often compared to the Maya in the sense that they were an advanced civilization that was prosperous, healthy, advanced in arts and science, and nobody knows why they disappeared. Scientists have no idea where they went, why they abandoned their capital, or what kind of unseen force may have played a part in their great exodus. The theory is that an extreme drought hit the desert area and they were forced to leave. Looking for the rain, it is rumored that they headed south, leaving trails of pottery and architecture along the way. The Canaanites. The Canaanite civilization is mentioned multiple times in the Bible. It is one of the most mysterious ancient societies that we know almost nothing about. That is, until recently, when new archaeological evidence revealed that the ancient Canaanites may have crafted the earliest pieces of an alphabet that we still use today. Archaeologists investigating the old Canaanite settlement of Lachish discovered a pottery shard dating back 3,500 years, inscribed with what they say is the oldest text anywhere in Israel, written using an alphabetic script. Earlier texts have been found from the Canaanite civilization, but they were written using hieroglyphics or other outdated methods. What this discovery has done is fill a gap in the earliest history of the written word. From what scientists can understand, Canaanite migrants developed the alphabet in ancient Egypt. This is the very alphabet that would spread around the world and ultimately become what is used today in English, Spanish, French, and many other languages. The pottery fragment itself was probably imported from Cyprus and was written on with ink in the earliest Canaanite alphabet. Scientists have not been able to decipher the short text, nor have they been able to figure out how the Canaanites managed to go from hieroglyphics to an actual alphabet. The Hittite Civilization. An archaeological discovery made over 100 years ago has been the source of some recent controversy. It involves the ancient biblical society of the Hittites, with experts now saying that proof of the Hittite civilization validates the historical record of the Bible, seeing as the Hittites are mentioned repeatedly throughout both the Hebrew and Christian Bibles. Historians have argued for many years over the existence of the Hittite, or at least their relationship with the biblical scripts. There simply hasn't been enough archaeological evidence to prove they ever existed. The Hittites were mentioned in the Old Testament at least 50 times. Then, in the early 1900s, German archaeologist Hugo Winkler heard of mysterious clay tablets found by looters in Turkey. He organized excavations in the area between 1906 and 1912, finding sculptures, temples, and a fortified tower. Even though the German archaeologists believed these ruins belonged to the Hittite civilization, there was no definitive proof. It wasn't until Hugo discovered what he believed was once a royal archive room filled with over 10,000 ancient clay tablets that the truth came to life. These tablets were deciphered by a Czech professor at the University of Vienna in 1915, at which point it was announced to the world that this ancient site was once the capital city of the Hittite kingdom, and that they had been known throughout history by another name, the Hattusha. But here's where the controversy, skepticism, and doubt came into play. Even though this discovery was made so long ago, people still argue against the Hittite culture ever being represented in the Bible. Some claim the Bible is talking about a completely different civilization of people with a similar name. Unfortunately, there is no way to tell which civilization is depicted in the Bible. Scientists don't even know what became of these people, where they came from, or why their capital was abandoned. Neolithic salt miners. Way before Stonehenge, people in Neolithic Britain were already mining salt. That's how important salt has been to humans. A new discovery of an extremely old salt processing site in the United Kingdom has archaeologists saying that whoever lived in Britain way before Stonehenge was built may have been the first salt miners anywhere in Europe. Called salterns, there have been several found in continental Europe, mostly in Poland and the Balkans, dating back to the Iron Age. This salt mine dates back to 3800 BC and was found at a coastal hilltop archaeological site near Leptus. Archaeologists uncovered a trench with broken shards of pottery, 3 hearths, and evidence of a storage pit. Some of the pieces of pottery still contain salt deposits. All the evidence points to salt processing. According to Steve Sherlock, the archaeologist who was in charge of the dig, the people who used this mine for processing salt were probably pioneers and the first in the United Kingdom to clear forests to build settlements. Pottery found here was introduced by people who migrated from northern France about 4000 BC, and they are the ones that most likely brought the salt mining know-how. But like pretty much every group of Neolithic people anywhere in the world 6,000 to 8,000 years ago, we don't really know who they were. We do know that salt would have been a rare and highly valuable commodity at the time, as it allowed foodstuffs to be preserved for use throughout the winter. Other structures found at the site indicate that it was a wealthy and thriving community. The unknown kingdom of King Hartapu. In a very rare occurrence, archaeologists in Turkey have discovered a civilization previously unknown to historians. According to Professor James Osborne, an archaeologist who specializes in Iron Age cities, nobody had any idea about the ancient kingdom. They discovered it in 2019, when a farmer told the group of archaeologists that he found a piece of stone with strange writing on it in a nearby canal. It was clear the group was standing at an ancient site that had been lost to time. While they couldn't begin excavations immediately, James Osborne was able to get the curious stone tablet translated. The writing on the tablet was nothing short of shocking. It turned out to be some kind of military boast, written by someone named King Hartapu. Nobody had ever heard of this guy before. Yet the stone told of a great military victory over the kingdom of Phrygia led by the infamous King Midas. It's true that Phrygia had been ruled by many different kings who went by the name of Midas. But dating of the stone corresponds to the time in which the true King Midas, the one who turned things to gold with his touch, ruled over Phrygia. Phrygia was a powerhouse kingdom, and defeating it would have taken a significant force. It's hard to believe that historians had never heard of this kingdom before. But thanks to King Hartapu and King Midas, they were not entirely lost to history. Researchers are, of course, excited to learn more and piece together the ancient puzzle. The Anunnaki gods. Who are the Anunnaki? Anyone obsessed with mysterious ancient civilizations knows that the Anunnaki are at the very top of the list when it comes to the unknown. Depending on who you ask, the Anunnaki can be one of many things. Some claim they were the gods of the Sumerian civilization that existed from 4100 to 1750 BC, as is suggested by stone artifacts and ancient depictions left behind. The Sumerians were the first civilization on Earth to divide time into hours and minutes, putting them at the forefront of human advancement. It makes sense that they also came up with one of the first complex religions featuring a pantheon of powerful deities. But wait just a minute, because some believe that the Anunnaki were not simply gods made up out of thin air by the Sumerians. There is a popular theory that says the Anunnaki were actually a civilization of their own. Some claim they were living, breathing beings. Of course, these same people believe that the Anunnaki were an ancient civilization of space travelers who came to Earth to enslave the human race, beginning with the Sumerians. But whether the Anunnaki were indeed a civilization of their own, possibly a society of reptilian humanoids that played a crucial role in advancing humankind, or if they were just mythological deities, well, science has no way of knowing. At least not until they come back and finish what they started. The gateway to Hades. Hades was the Greek god of the underworld, son of the Titan Cronus, and he had the Helm of Darkness, which was headgear that allowed the wearer to become invisible. The Greeks believed that since he ruled underground, he also had access to the secret wealth hidden in the earth, such as precious metals and fertile soil. He is both terrifying and generous at the same time. The ancient city of Taenarum is located at the farthest end of the Mani Peninsula in Greece, and it was believed to be the mythical gateway to Hades. According to legend, it was founded by Taenarus, sometimes referred to as the son of Zeus or Poseidon, depending on who you ask. The city was likely constructed by a group of people known as the Helots, a subjugated race persecuted by the Spartans. The city quickly rose to fame because of its marble and purple snails. This might not sound that great, but these snails were extremely valuable since this is where the very expensive purple dye came from in the ancient world. The inhabitants of the city built as many temples as they could, including one for Poseidon and one for Apollo. The Temple of Poseidon was a cave-like structure on the coast, and it also doubled as the gateway to Hades. It was said that after a person died, they would go through the gateway and be transported to the river Styx, where the ferryman Charon would judge whether they went to Elysium or Tartarus, the latter of which was basically Greek hill. It's even said that Hercules dragged the three-headed beast Cerberus through this very cave during his 12 labors. Located in the ancient city near the sanctuary and temple of Poseidon was an oracle. It was believed that here, near these gates to Hades, people would speak with the dead who rose from the underworld and they could ask them questions. Pilgrims would come for days or weeks and consume hallucinogenic plants in order to communicate better with the dead. Today, the exact place of the sea cave that led to the underworld remains unknown. The Cursed City. Chorazin is an ancient village located in the Galilee region of Israel, and it's said to be cursed. But who cursed this ancient city? Apparently, it was Jesus. The village is part of the Evangelical Triangle, 3 towns where Jesus spent the majority of his life on earth. But before Jesus was ever around, Chorazin was a simple agricultural center with the occasional temple ritual and quality grain production. But according to verses from Matthew and Luke, Chorazin was one of only 2 cities that rejected Jesus and his miracles, and so he cursed them. But what does history tell us about the small Israeli village? We know that it was abandoned in the year 135 and rebuilt about 150 years later. The entire city was then destroyed shortly after by an earthquake. It never was rebuilt, and its ruins still haunt the landscape today. It's part of an archaeological park that spans 25 acres. The mystery here is, well, did Jesus really curse the city 2,000 years ago? After all, it was abandoned shortly after his death, only to be rebuilt and destroyed by a freak natural disaster. There have never been any archaeological findings to suggest a curse, but that's practically impossible. How would you find physical evidence of a curse thousands of years ago? Neither has it been physically confirmed that anyone named Jesus ever visited the town to perform miracles. All we know is that it was cursed in the Bible and befell terrible misfortune in real life before the locals gave up on it. Leptus Magna. The ruins of Leptus Magna are nothing short of mysterious. This ancient city was initially founded by the Carthaginian Empire before being conquered by Rome. Rome was gracious enough to allow the inhabitants of the city to remain under the rule of their native leaders, though it later became a Roman province of Africa under Emperor Tiberius. The city quickly flourished and became a main trading hub in the Mediterranean. But then came the 5th century. The Roman Empire began to decline, the city of Leptus Magna was captured by the Vandals, recaptured by Emperor Justinian I of the Byzantine Empire in 533, then overrun 100 years later during the Muslim conquest and turned into an abandoned ruin. The city's history was wiped out overnight. Since then, this mysterious archaeological site has been a popular playground for colonial plunderers, specifically the English and the French. During the 17th century, 600 ancient pillars were taken from the city and delivered to the palace at Versailles in Paris. The pillaging went on, and today there is almost nothing left of what was once a prosperous and multicultural city. Over 1,000 years of history was literally removed and spread across the world by hungry European leaders who had an affinity for foreign architecture. As you can imagine, this has made tracing the true history of the city very difficult. Everyone's got a piece. Palmyra. Palmyra is located in modern Syria, but was first established during the 3rd century BC. It's about 100 miles from Damascus and has been around since the Stone Age. It started as a small settlement near a desert oasis. Back then, the area was rich and fertile soil and date palm trees. It was a great place for farming and herding. The original name of the city in Arabic was Tadmor, which translates roughly to date palm, after the famous trees. The settlement grew into a small city ruled by the Mesopotamians before eventually getting assimilated into the Arab Empire. In 64 BC, the Roman Empire conquered the region and Palmyra became a largely autonomous state and a reliable trading partner with Rome. In the 3rd century, a warrior queen appeared named Zenobia. Her royal lineage went back 6 generations, and she and her husband the king rose against Rome and began to conquer nearby lands. He was eventually murdered, and Queen Zenobia, along with her trusted general, went and conquered Egypt, claiming Alexandria as her ancestral city. She led her army as the warrior queen and conquered Syria, Lebanon, and Palestine, creating her own empire separate from Rome. She cut off the wheat and grain supply to the Roman Empire, and finally she got their attention. Emperor Aurelian was not happy and sent a giant army to fight her. She lost and was sent to Rome as a hostage. Over the years, Palmyra remained part of the Roman Empire, then the Byzantines. Then Timurid warlords, a tribe of Mongol origin, completely destroyed the city in the early 1400s. They reduced it practically to rubble. Even when the city was rebuilt later, it was far from the grand metropolis it once was. By 1932, all that remained of Palmyra was a small village under French rule, its mysterious past largely forgotten. Yet amazingly, some structures still remain, even despite centuries of war. The ruins of the Temple of Bel still stand, once used for the worship of an ancient Mesopotamian god. There are other temples that date to the Romans, an ancient Senate meeting house, an old bathing pool once hemmed by huge Egyptian columns, and even a vault crypt steeped in mystery. Even though the city has largely been destroyed over the years, it still holds many secrets of the ancient world. The Ghost City. The village of Kuldara in India has been abandoned since the 19th century, but its roots go back about 800 years. Today, the village is filled with the ruins of dilapidated houses, roads covered in dust, and what some say are hordes of ghosts and curses. This small village holds a dark and mysterious secret and has been known to give visitors a distinct sense of unease, as if walking somewhere they don't belong. The village was established in the 13th century by a local clan. It became prosperous, growing to a size of about 1,500 people with somewhere around 400 homes. But as far as the story goes, in 1825, every last person in the village left in the middle of the night and was never seen again. Some say this mass exodus was part of a curse. Some say their ghosts still haunt the streets of Kuldara. Others don't even have an explanation because the story is so strange, and yet historians agree that it definitely did happen. Today, the town is a heritage site. It's also wildly creepy and exceptionally terrifying. There is apparently a curse still lingering over the village so that nobody will ever live in it again. Old Dubai Gorge. On the outside, Old Dubai Gorge doesn't look like much of an archaeological site. It just looks like dirt and rocks. However, this is arguably the most important archaeological site in the entire world, and one of the most mysterious. It's located in Tanzania, and it is famous because it holds the earliest evidence of our first human ancestors in the midst of evolution. Paleontologists have discovered many fossilized bones in the area, along with stone tools that date back millions of years. The gorge itself is located near Serengeti National Park. It was only formed around 30,000 years ago because of geological activity. A whole lot of years before that, it was a breeding ground for early humans. Some of the first discoveries came in the 1960s and 70s, when researchers discovered the first ever bones of a new hominin they called Homo habilis, meaning handy human, because the animal-human hybrid seemed able to use tools. Throughout the years, many skeletons have been found here, with the oldest dating back around 2 million years. And while there have certainly been older humanoid fossils found, Specifically in Ethiopia, the sheer number of them found in the old Dubai Gorge suggests some kind of primitive settlement where hominins were evolving. The mystery here is that scientists have never been able to pinpoint a specific place in Africa where humans came from, but the old Dubai Gorge is definitely one of the best contenders for the origins of human evolution. Ancient Buddhist complex. Archaeologists working far in the north of Pakistan made a pretty fantastic discovery when they began investigating a mysterious archaeological location complete with an old Buddhist complex roughly 2,000 years old. As of right now, this is the largest complex known to historians ever to have been constructed in the area. Based on its estimated date of construction, it was built during the Kushan Empire, which once controlled almost all of modern Afghanistan, Pakistan, and much of northern India between the years 30 and 375. This site was first discovered by Italian archaeologists back in the 1930s. However, the digging stopped and no significant discoveries were ever made. It wasn't until the 21st century, just a few months ago, that any major discoveries were announced. Researchers now know that the area is rich in stupas, schools, meditation halls, and specialized cells high up in the mountains where monks used to live in complete isolation. People often think of Pakistan and the surrounding area as being heavily Muslim in influence, and they definitely are, but not that long ago the region was primarily Buddhist. Discovered inside of the Buddhist complex were some very fascinating fresco paintings depicting images from Buddhist mythology, which was a huge shock because archaeologists have never before found fresco paintings at any site from the Kushan Empire. Ancient structure made of bones. 300 miles south of Moscow in Russia, archaeologists were absolutely shocked to discover a huge circle of mammoth bones in 2014. The circle of bones dates back 25,000 years. It's an almost perfect circle of skulls, tusks, leg bones, rib bones, and every other kind of bone that you would find in a mammoth. But 25,000 years ago, it wasn't a flat circle of dead animal bones. Rather, it was a structure so large and so imposing that the Ice Age people who made it couldn't figure out how to put a roof on it. But what makes the horrifying bone structure so mysterious is that no archaeologist has been able to figure out just what it was used for. It almost looks like the biggest sacrificial pit in history, or like a castle built for some kind of monstrous warlord from the bones of his enemies. Only no human bones were made in this particular construction. How many bones were used, you ask? Over 60 woolly mammoths were picked apart to create the structure. Our Paleolithic ancestors went through an excruciating amount of labor to get this project done. According to Alexander Pyor, an archaeologist working with the University of Exeter in England, the bones were probably sourced from elsewhere and then dragged all the way to this specific location. But unfortunately, Alexander can't say why they did it or even what the structure had originally looked like. Mysterious Empire. A drought in Iraq has revealed a mysterious empire and a palace that dates back 3,400 years. The discovery actually comes from the Mosul Dam Reservoir, which recently lost a significant amount of its water. With the reservoir devoid of liquid, the leftovers of an ancient civilization appeared. A team of archaeologists from Germany then went to investigate, and they found the ruins of a palace that probably belonged to the Mitanni Empire, an extremely mysterious people who left almost nothing behind. They are one of the least researched empires anywhere in the Middle East region, or the Eastern Hemisphere for that matter. Researchers haven't even identified the capital of the ancient empire yet. There have only been a couple of sites found related to them. They don't know what kind of religion they practiced, and absolutely nobody knows where they went or even how long they ruled for. The remains of the palace and the reservoir were not great. Archaeologists did manage to find some clay tablets, some walls painted in bright shades of red and blue, and that was pretty much it. The water levels have already risen, making further research impossible. River House Ruin. The River House Ruin in Utah can be found near the San Juan River. The ruin is in the middle of the desert, carved into the side of a rock cliff. It also dates back nearly 1,000 years. But who built this cliff house and why? River House was probably built by the ancient Anasazi people who lived throughout the desert regions of what is today Arizona, Colorado, Utah, and New Mexico. They are officially known as the ancestral Pueblo people, since Anasazi was actually a Navajo word that meant ancient enemy. The ancestral ancestral Puebloans were the same people who lived in the huge cliff city of Mesa Verde, which is actually just a few miles away from the river house ruin. Both structures were likely made by the same group at the same time, during the 12th century. The only difference is that Mesa Verde is extremely large, and the river house ruin doesn't get nearly as much attention. Ancestral Puebloans were living in North America for thousands of years, but they eventually migrated into the deserts of the Southwest and began building their homes directly into cliffs for protection from others, and from the elements. They lived in rock structures just like this one for about 100 years before vanishing mysteriously in the 1300s, during what historians believe could have been a mass exodus to the south, probably into what is today Mexico, but historians can't tell for sure why the civilization declined. Sacsayhuaman. The fortress of Sacsayhuaman, or Sexy Woman if you don't speak Spanish, is located in the Peruvian Andes just outside the old Inca capital of Cusco. This fortress is estimated to be over 1,000 years old. The walls are built out of enormous stone blocks that seem to be carved with laser-like precision. The rocks are stacked together like a jigsaw puzzle and are estimated to weigh almost 360 tons each. Not just that, to build the fortress, the rocks were hauled for more than 20 miles before being lifted and placed with immaculate perfection. Sacsayhuaman continues to baffle the scientific community. Researchers believe it would have taken about 20,000 to 30,000 people to construct the fort and 60 years to complete it. The remains of an ancient tower have also been found at the site, with 3 water channels constructed that may have been used to fill a reservoir with water. The Inca Empire had already mastered engineering skills way before other civilizations rose to prominence. They built several fortified complexes, but how the Incas moved the stones remains a mystery. According to one theory, the Incas had developed a rope and lever system, which could move very large stones. Even modern-day machinery would have a hard time transporting these enormous blocks. Capable of accommodating 5,000 fighters, the complex is in ruins today, but is still admired for the remarkable architectural engineering that would have been needed to build the site. Some believe that Cusco was laid out in the form of a puma shape when seen from above. If so, that would mean that Sacsayhuaman was its head. Not only was this fortress complex incredibly advanced, but it was just one of several large cities meant to form one large image when seen from the sky. Leshan Giant Buddha. At 232 feet, the Leshan Giant Buddha is the largest Buddha statue in the entire world. This statue is an amazing feat of ancient engineering, carved into the side of a cliff in central Sichuan, China. According to legend, the giant Buddha offers protection to those traveling up the nearby rivers. Construction on this megalithic project began in 730 AD, under orders of a monk named Hai Tong. It's been said that when funding for the giant project fell through, the monk gouged out his own eyes to show his sincerity. It was finally completed in 803 by the monk's disciples, long after he had already died. To understand just how impressive the huge Buddha is, especially considering it was built over 1,000 years ago, take a look at some of these features it has. There are 1,021 buns in the Buddha's hair. At least 100 people can sit on his feet at the same time, and it's the tallest structure in the entire region. Even more amazing is that sometimes a halo will appear over the Buddha's head. This natural phenomenon happens because of diffused reflections of sunlight on the water's surface below, creating a type of angelic glow about the Buddha. Equally as impressive as the Buddha's huge stature is the draining system that accompanies it. The people who built it took into account the effect of water and erosion over time, so they built a drainage system behind the Buddha's head that has kept the structure safe from eroding beyond repair for the past 1,000 years. It also sometimes makes it look like the Buddha is crying. Roman concrete. 2,000 years after the Romans first began building impressive structures out of concrete, the mixture they first invented is still better than anything used today. It's one of the enduring mysteries of ancient Rome. Even after so many years of their temples and structures being beaten by sea waves and eroded by time, the concrete still stands strong. A recent study by scientists from the University of Utah has proved that Roman concrete is more durable than modern concrete, and that it gets stronger over time, something that modern concrete definitely does not do. However, scientists are still scrambling to figure out the original recipe for the Romans' famous concrete. As of right now, researchers have figured out the crystalline structure of the concrete, showing how it solidifies as time goes on. Our current concrete is made from limestone, silica sand, clay, and a few other ingredients melted together, but it gives absolutely no room for expansion or any kind of movement. Otherwise, the concrete could crack and structures could break. But Roman concrete was made using volcanic ash, seawater, and perhaps other mystery ingredients. This resulted in an extraordinarily durable solution that stands up better than what we make today. Chand Bauri. Chand Bauri is a stairway nightmare. It is also an incredible feat of ancient engineering. It was first described by a French traveler in 1864, who discovered Chand Bauri in the northern Indian state of Rajasthan. It's what is known as a stepwell, with the earliest of these structures going back to the year 550. There were once 3,000 stepwells all throughout the brutal regions of the Thar Desert. In this area of India, they suffer from serious water shortages. The monsoon comes once a season, dumps a huge amount of water, and then all that water vanishes. To solve the problem of the missing water, stepwells were built. They were basically artificial ponds that would collect the water so that people could bathe and drink long after the monsoon had gone. The Chand Bauri stepwell is the biggest ever made and the most spectacular. The structure itself has 4 sides, with one side being an immense temple. There are 3,500 steps along the other 3 sides, with the interior walls stretching up to 13 stories. There was enough room inside of the stepwell for over 100 feet of collected water. It was first built in the 10th century and was dedicated to the goddess of joy and happiness. But alas, stepwells seriously fell out of fashion. When the British began taking a serious interest in India, they were horrified by the stepwells because people were literally bathing and drinking in giant towers of stagnant water. While they were extremely beautiful, they may not be the most hygienic. Most of them today are ruined or used as trash dumps. The artwork and incredible construction is forgotten about and left abandoned. Automatic doors. In the 1st century AD, the ancient city of Alexandria was the only place in the world that had automatic doors. That's right, the Greeks invented automatic doors first. It was a mathematician named Heron of Alexandria, and he devised a hydraulic system to open and close the doors of a temple without anyone needing to pull on the door handle. Because Greek temples always had fires burning at their altars, Heron used the ever-burning flame to his advantage. He put a brass pot under the fire, filled it half with water, and then connected it to a pulley system. When a priest lit the fire in the morning, the air would expand inside the brass pot and force water into the pots connected to the pulley system, which would then descend so that the doors would spring open. It was a very complicated game of mousetrap and wasn't entirely useful for anything other than showmanship. Imagine living during that time and arriving at the temple where the door opened like magic. It would surely seem as if the gods themselves were there. This was an impressive invention. Heron named it Machine Number 37, suggesting he had been experimenting with pneumatics and hydraulics for quite some time. However, it would be another 2,000 years before real automatic doors were created in 1931. Mysterious desert lines. Throughout Israel, Jordan, and Egypt, there are strange lines in the desert that were first spotted by British pilots in the early 20th century. Back then, nobody knew what these mysterious desert lines were. The lines consist of small stone walls that begin with a huge gap between them and then slowly converge at large circular pits. In some places, the lines go on for at least 40 miles before turning into pits. But what are these strange structures? Some have claimed alien technology, but the truth is a lot simpler than that. A recent study showed the mysterious desert lines are actually ancient animal traps. Most of them date back at least 2,400 years and were probably used for hunting gazelles. The people here perfected this technology, using stone corridors to funnel gazelles into death pits where they would be slaughtered. Research has shown that the ancient people who lived in the region were far more sophisticated than previously thought, and that they had a much stronger knowledge of animals and migration patterns, able to devise complex plans and to create these amazing structures to kill more animals. Their hunting methods were so advanced and extreme that mass slaughter such as this may have even contributed to the rapid extinction of many prehistoric animals that aren't around today. Ancient hot pots. The ancient people of Siberia had a pretty unique way of cooking their food that may have helped them live in the inhospitable wasteland they called home. 16,000 years ago, Siberia was not a great place to live. The Ice Age still hadn't finished yet, and it was a tough time to be alive. But the Siberians figured out how to create hot pots to help their chances of survival. These were ceramic pots resistant to heat that could preserve food for much longer than simply putting scraps of meat in your pocket. The hot pots also worked to preserve the important nutrients. This discovery was made after an international team of researchers analyzed scraps of pottery found at several different archaeological sites throughout Siberia. Not only are these pieces of pottery some of the oldest in the entire world, but they were also discovered to contain traces of cooked fish, fats, and lipids. What this suggests is that prehistoric Siberians were making exceptionally meaty meals filled with bone grease and marrow. Researchers have also hypothesized that learning how to create pottery for the storage of precious food could have been a result of the changing climate. In other words, it was the Siberians who made the world's first Tupperware containers. Ancient Peruvian phone. The iPhone only came out a few years ago, but before that, there was the home phone. Going back even further, we have the telegram. But if we go back 1400 years ago, we arrive at the true first telephone ever created. It was made by an ancient culture in Peru. But of course, the telephone didn't use any electricity. Instead, it was created using two hollowed-out gourds and a very long piece of string, utilizing acoustic sound. It was very similar to a string telephone using tin cans, only with a cord that went for 75 feet. Only one of these instruments was ever discovered, and nobody knows how the ancient people came up with the idea. And what's even more bizarre is that the culture who invented the first telephone hadn't even come up with a written language yet. It was the people of the Chimu Empire who created this telephone. They were the first true engineers of the New World. They ruled much of northern Peru until being defeated and destroyed by the Inca civilization somewhere around the year 1470. And even though the Chimu civilization had no written language and no ability to draw blueprints that we know of, they had still managed to construct at least 10,000 buildings and 9 megalithic palaces. They also had a system of canals that went on for 50 miles, using the canals to irrigate the otherwise inhospitable desert. And to top everything off, they created a legitimate telephone. It only had a range of 75 feet, but that's still pretty impressive. Egyptian egg hatching ovens. Rather than looking at the Egyptian pyramids, we all know how impressive they are, let's take a look at a different feat of engineering tackled by the Egyptians. 2,000 years ago, they figured out how to make egg ovens. Egg ovens were a genius method to hatch large numbers of eggs at the same time to help out a booming poultry industry. In fact, the design of the ancient egg oven was so clever that it is still being used today by rural farmers in Egypt. But what exactly was this strange thing? Think of it like an incubator. It was exceptionally unique for the time in which it was created. Not even Europe had any idea. Europeans had nothing like this at the time. They still let their chickens pop out eggs willy-nilly. But the Egyptians were doing it on a massive scale and needed to make it even bigger. The egg ovens were made from brick. Up to 4,000 eggs would be placed inside the lower chamber of the oven, normally during autumn when it's optimal time for egg hatching. They would then slowly warm the eggs until they hatched, but they would move the eggs to different chambers inside of the massive oven as necessary, with different chambers having different temperatures. The goal was to mimic the heat given to an egg by the mother hen. The result was that Egyptians could now force eggs to hatch when they wanted them to, producing thousands and thousands of chickens all at the exact same time. Ancient steam power. In the ancient city of Alexandria, back in 62 AD, the very first steam engine in the world was created by someone I already told you about, Heron of Alexandria. Not only did this guy create the first automatic door, he also made the first steam engine nearly 2,000 years before the Industrial Revolution started. The invention is known as the alopile, and it worked as a reaction steam turbine. According to Popular Mechanics, the device was made from a hollow sphere mounted above a fire. It had 2 spouts from which steam would escape. Inside the sphere was a small amount of water. Once a fire was lit, the sphere would begin to spin very quickly from torque created by the concentrated steam. It didn't actually do anything. The fire created the steam, and the steam spun the sphere very fast. It was probably used to impress people, but it was also the first known example of reactive force, the same kind of principle used in rocket technology. Making a sphere spin using steam is quite different from making a train go down a track or a rocket fly in the air, but it was definitely a step in the right direction. Thanks for watching! Which of these amazing things did you find the most impressive? Let me know in the comments below, and remember to hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you next time. Bye!